Again, any more hugs need to be given? Joe's available. If you don't know why that's funny, it's all right. You probably didn't give him a hug. It's fantastic. There you go. That's so sweet. Every time I've mentioned hug, you've given multiple people hugs. It's great. We are starting a brand new series today that I think I mentioned this before, but I'm excited about. It is called Verses, and this series is all about the tension that we feel internally. Right? We battle, we struggle with things, and some of them are right, wrong, like good, bad. Others of them are just an is thing, but we're not really sure. Like one day we feel like we're going left, another day we feel like we're going right. We can't really put it all together. And the problem that we see in life is if you are constantly wrestling left and right, you don't make any movement, and you don't end up going anywhere. You just stay put and stay still. It's kind of like exercise. Exercising, trying to be physically fit, you can't just make one decision one day, I'm going to eat good today and I'm going to exercise today. You do it, you're like, check it off the list, I'm physically fit now. It doesn't work that way. You have to make the same decision today, tomorrow, the next day, over and over. And all those small, tiny little steps eventually lead you somewhere. So this is what we're going to talk about throughout the series, that we're going to try to make a bunch of little tiny steps in the direction that we think is best for ourselves. It might just be a healthy thing. It might be a thing that we feel like is going to move us towards our Heavenly Father. But we're trying to make those tiny, small, little steps in deciding which side we're going to choose of the opposing pole in our internal self. Your direction, this is another way to put it. Your direction in life is determined by the cumulative directional steps you take. So if you put all of the steps you take, even if you do like 25 steps in one direction and then 3 over here, you can feel bad about the 3, but you're moving in a direction. I used to see life more like as all about achievements and accomplishments, and I need to achieve this and that, and I had my checklist and my priorities and my goals and all those things set. And I used to think that as long as I could check some of those things off, I was doing well. But what I realized is life is way more directional. I need to move in the direction that I believe is best for me, for my family, for my faith, personally. So we're going to be taking a look at some of these like north versus south, east versus west poles that we have in our life. And today specifically, what we're going to look at, you might jump ahead and be like, oh, this is introverted versus extroverted. It's not. That's not what this is. And if you don't know what introverted and extroverted is, let me just kind of give you a real brief explanation. It is your relationship with the energy that you have when you're around people. So if people build energy into you, like if you're around people, all of a sudden you're more excited and more energetic than you were before they showed up, or if they're draining on you, that's the first one's extroverted, the second one's introverted. Here's an example. I did student ministries for a long time, and so did my wife, and she's awesome at it. I'm okay at it. But we would have these nights, we'd do it on Sunday night, and we'd have our volunteers show up, our team of volunteers show up. We do the pre-meeting ahead of time, kind of lay the land out, let everyone know what we're going to do. And then we'd actually have students start showing up. We'd have a bunch of kids show up. We'd do the whole night. It was awesome, full of energy. And then we'd conclude with another meeting at the end with those same volunteers, the same team. Be like, all right, what happened tonight? What can we celebrate tonight? What can we do better next week? And that would be like, so I was at the time, I would be volunteering my time, so I had another job full time. During the week, this is on the weekend, I would be so amped up by the end of the night. I was like, that was awesome after 3 hours of just being around people all day. And that was after we had church in the morning also. So I was just like, cloud 9, this was amazing. We should just keep the party rolling. Everyone should come over. We should watch a movie. We should do something. Ice cream. I don't know. Jack in the Box. Like, that was me. My wife, on the other hand, and she loves people. I need to say that right up front. She loves people. But at the end of the night, when I was like, let's do more, she was like, I need a nap for 3 days now. Like, can I just go to bed and shut the door and not have anyone talk to me for a while? She loves people. Up on stage, I'm one thing, but if you get to know me, I'm probably the most introverted extrovert. She's probably the most extroverted introvert. So we're just a big mess is what we are. But extroverted and introvert, I say that because I don't want you to get confused about what we're talking about. That's about your personality. That's how you're created. This is not that. What we're going to talk about this morning is isolation versus community. Isolation versus community. And you might think that you naturally move in one direction or the other, and that's fine. But we all have a history. We all have a past. We all have something in our in our rearview mirror that has led us in the direction that we're moving in both of these two categories. So when I was growing up, and when I was like in junior high age, which is just an awkward, uncomfortable, trying to figure out life as a whole. I'm not a child anymore. I'm not a man yet. I'm just a mess. We all know that's the worst. Let's just be honest. That's the worst season of life as a whole. Like, it's just the op. And if you're trying to do student ministry, again, that's anyway. Let's jump over that. But in this season, I was dealing with more than just that. I'd also had some friends, I think I've shared this before, some friends that I'd grown up with, spent a tremendous amount of time with. We went to church every week together. We went to each other's houses after church. This group of friends, there's 3 of us. 2 of them were still friends, and we went on a retreat. Well, I thought I was still a friend at the time. And then the day 1 of the retreat, right, junior high retreat, like, this is a little bit new because I'm not in grade school anymore, away from mom and dad, away from church, away from everything that's comfortable. It's like awesome retreat center. We're going to have a lot of fun. And this is like within the first hour of getting off the bus. They're like, Andrew, come here. We need to talk. I was like, that's weird. Okay, what are we doing? And they're like, we are doing something you are not. We want to be friends still. We are still friends. We want you to find other friends. And that was a great weekend of crying. That's what that was. It did. I know. That's appropriate. That's all right. You can do the O. So I was dealing with that and trying to figure out real life pain. That hurt. That stung. I was wrestling through those emotions. It upended really how I saw myself. Like, if I could be honest here, and my grandma at the same time, she was diagnosed with cancer, so I was trying to figure out some of that as well. Like, there's just a lot going on. And if you would have known me beforehand, and if you'd have known me during that season, you would have recognized that some of the color that made me was starting to fade, if that makes sense at all. Like, the dial was getting turned down on who I was. Just as I processed all these things, wrestled with real life situations, some of them for the first time that I ever had. And if you'd have met me at that time for the first time, you'd be like, oh, he's definitely an introvert. Oh, he definitely wants to be by himself. And to be honest, there was a lot of days I was like, that would be the ideal dream. Just move out to the middle of nowhere, cabin, dog, and I'm fine. Like, if I could do that, that would be great. But that's not who I was. I was just dealing with the pain and with the frustration, with the anger of what life had just handed me. It's this natural knee-jerk reaction. When something hurts us, we move away from it, right? But this is also true that it's not necessarily the thing as a whole that is bad. Like fire. You can get hurt by fire, but we all know that fire does a lot of good things too. We just learn not to put our hand in it. Or that at some point, if you get a little too close, it's going to sting, it's going to hurt. Right? Fire can be a good thing, but you still can get hurt by it. People can be good things, but you can still get hurt by it. So my story, what changed it for me, actually was people. Some of the unexpected people that I didn't even know actually impacted that season in where I was at. They came alongside me. They were empathetic towards me. They decided to sit down in my pain with me, get to know me, hear my story. They were interested in me. They started to invest in my life. And because of that, I started to change. Right? Because here's the thing. I found community before I became resentful. And it was this close. It was this close. And that would have been a directional shift for the rest of my life, even at that age and stage. Now, I know that that's not everyone's story. I know that some of you in this room, you're like, you know what? I had a community around me, and they were the ones that hurt me. They were the ones that handed me pain, and nobody else showed up. It was only more pain and more hurt and more distrust. And if that's your story, I totally get it. And I understand when you see this, you're like, well, if I'm going to choose, I know which one I'm going to choose. I get it. I understand it. But here's a thought as I was just kind of processing through this whole thing. A lack of community can equate to a lack of value in community. When you don't have the people around you that are loving you, that are caring on you, that are trying to do life with you and support you and encourage you and challenge you, when you don't have that, you start to see it as less and less valuable in your life. Now, we all need community, though. Every single one of us. It's just kind of in our DNA. It's how we're created. So if you're sitting here and you're like, you know what, I don't think I really want to, you're probably an introvert. A. You probably have some pain, B. And here's what I would like to tell you. Even introverts need some relationships. Like, you don't need a lot. You probably don't need a lot. We're not going to like give you a whole roster. But you need a couple people. You need a few people in your life. Everybody needs a few people in your life to be able to love on you, care for you, do life with you. Now, before we get into the isolation versus community within Scripture and kind of look at some examples in there, I wanted to talk about some reasons why we move away from community and towards isolation. So first one, we kind of talked about this for a second already, but people cause pain, so we avoid people. Like, it makes total sense. It's hard to walk through. Even if you recognize that, it's still hard to walk through because there's pain, there's wounds, there's scars that you carry, burdens that you're still carrying. Right? I get that. I understand that. They both can be true. People can cause pain. We avoid people, and we still need people in our life in order to be a better version of ourselves. Another reason, inauthentic relationships can be exhausting. I think that one of the most... This sounds like more like high school to me than anything else. But as I was thinking about this, when you are surrounded with people that you're just trying to impress, when you're surrounded with people you're just trying to fit in with, when you're surrounded with people that you know you can't be your full version, you're withholding part of who you are around them. If that's as deep of a relationship as you have, that is exhausting. It's tiresome. And at the end of the day, you're like, I don't know if it's even worth it. Because they don't even know who I am. I have these other thoughts. I have this other stuff. I've got these, I got more to me than what they see, but I'm afraid to extend that because of the pain that might be caused, or they might just walk away as a whole. So some other, and I know there's a ton of reasons why, but some other ones, pride. So I would rather just do things on my own. I don't need somebody else. I don't need your help. I don't need your sympathy. I got it. I'm strong enough. I'm big enough. And at some point, you're going to find out that you're not. Right? At some point, you're going to find out that life is a little bit bigger than me. And there's some things that are a little bit stronger than me. And there's circumstances that I can't just muscle through. There's other moments where you think, you know what, it's just a trust thing. I trust myself more than anybody else. So it's easier for me to get into a relationship with myself than trying to trust somebody else that I know is going to fail me. I know is going to let me down. One of the biggest ones might be that it's hard for you to get vulnerable with someone. It's hard to be vulnerable. Right? Because vulnerability requires you to open yourself up, knowing that if someone does something in that space, in that openness that you're allowing yourself to express, that will, it's not if it will absolutely cause pain. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, that means that you're open to pain. You're open to hurt. You're open to those wounds that maybe you've already experienced before, you don't want to experience again. But here's what I know in my own experience and what I've seen, what I've studied, what I've learned, is that authentic community will require vulnerability. You can't do one without the other. It requires that there's vulnerability if you want that authentic, deep relationship in community. Like I said, there's more examples. I mean, we could sit here all day and we could go on and on and on about why isolation is easy to move towards. But the reality is that anything that is good and healthy and beneficial for ourselves, we have an endless list of why we don't want to move in that direction. Right? That's how this is. That's how this works. I've watched too many people. I know I've been a pastor long enough and I've been in ministry long enough for decades, and I've watched too many people firsthand choose isolation over community. And every single time, this is just me, but every single time I've watched it, every time I've experienced it, it is not healthy. Every single time, it's not beneficial. Every single time, it is not moving them in the direction of personal health and growth or faith development. It doesn't move them in that direction. It moves them further away from that. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, hold on. I've read my Bible a little bit too. There's this guy named Jesus, and he also withdrew from people. What about that? What about that, Andrew? Here's what I'm going to say, just to get clear with you. Moments of solitude are different than the direction of isolation. Moments of solitude are absolutely beneficial. They're healthy. They're good. They're right. And sometimes we need extended solitude, but we need some solitude to get away from people, not to remove ourselves from a relationship, but that we can re-engage at a healthier level, where we have the opportunity, right, to be overflowing with what God pours into us in those moments of solitude, that we are stable again, that we're confident again, that we once again have our eyes up in order that we can develop those relationships and be even better in them, right? So moments of solitude are different than the direction of isolation, which just walks off. It's just, nope, I'm out. I don't need relationship. I don't want relationship. I'm out. I'm going to go at it alone. Now, I will give a real brief warning here, or maybe just a challenge. I've never been invited into the spot where someone's wrestling with this question of isolation versus community. Hey, you know what, Andrew, I'm struggling with this. I feel like I just want to walk away. People don't ask me that question, probably because they know what I'm going to say. But if you're wrestling with that right now, if you're evaluating like, you know what, people are just too messy. They're too hard. They're too painful. They're just too much. And you're wrestling with trying to move away. And maybe you haven't like recognized this and put it to words, but you can start to see yourself withdrawing from your community, withdrawing from your relationships. If you're in that spot, my challenge for you right now, right here, is that you would talk to someone. Talk to someone in here. Talk to someone that you have a relationship with. Talk to someone that cares about you. Talk to me. I would love to take you out. Coffee, lunch, we'll do whatever. I mean, it's fine. It's a lot of fun. Well, I will talk or I'll just listen most of the time. I want to know what you're walking through and I want to help you out. And that's not like a hollow invitation. You can seriously email me, call me, whatever. Andrew@canionschurch.net. Email me. Let me know. We'll get something on the schedule. Now as we move forward, we're going to take a look at two examples that are reasons, they're like negative examples, like if there would have been community here, probably would have ended up a little bit better. And then one example that shows you the power of community in a difficult situation also. So the first one we're going to look at is Elijah. Now Elijah, just some context here, history of Israel. Israel was the nation that God created. He started with Abraham. They developed into a large nation. Eventually they decided that they're gonna want a king. They didn't have a king. God set it up that they didn't need a king. He was to be the one sitting on the throne, and they looked around at the other nations. They're like, yeah, but down the road they do, and they do. And you know what would really help is if I could talk to someone and manipulate them to get what I want. That would really benefit me. So eventually God is like that toddler that just asks and asks and asks and asks and begs and begs and begs. And finally God's like, okay, you want a king? Here's your king. Do you remember the first king? Didn't work out great. His name was Saul. And then there's this pattern that happens where we'd have a good king and then a bad king. A king that would lead people back to God and prioritize that as the center of everything that is the nation of Israel. And then he'd have, kings that led them away. They would invite the gods of the surrounding people. They would bring in these false idols and everything else. They'd start to worship, not God, but these other gods. And in those moments, in these negative seasons where the leadership that was in place would lead the nation of Israel away, God would raise up these prophets. He would raise up someone in order to confront the king, the queen, whoever's in charge, and be like, this is not good. This is not going well. You need to turn the ship around. We need to move in this direction once again. So you have kind of these good kings and then prophets kind of going back and forth throughout the history of Israel. If you read your Old Testament, that's what it looks like and sounds like. So Elijah is one of those prophets. This is, again, just for kind of context, about 850 or so BC, so right around there. So in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 21, Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. So essentially, this is one of those moments, right? There's a prophet here for a reason. Because the people, led by their king and queen, the people have actually started to move away from God. They've invited this false god, Baal, into their nation. They're worshiping him. And Elijah is like, hey, which one are you going to choose? Decide for yourself. Don't sit on the fence any longer. You got to get off the fence. Choose one way or another. I know what I'm going to choose, but you need to choose as well. So he continues on, verse 22. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. That's a big statement. Okay, we're going to circle back around to that in a little bit. But Elijah feels alone at this point in time. But Baal has 450 prophets. He's like, it's me against the world, guys. This is the deal. It's me against the world, but I have God on my side. So he does this like, it's not I mean, today, in movies today that we watch, it'd be like a dance battle. It's not a dance battle. It's an offering off. They decided, Elijah's like, you know what we're going to do? Here's how we're going to solve this. You and all your prophets are going to go over here on Mount Carmel, and we're going to have you can make an offering, and then I'm going to make an offering, and whoever God consumes the offering with fire is the one true God. So he is the gentleman, so he lets them go first, and they are a lot. It starts off in the morning. They're singing songs. They're kind of doing their thing. They're chanting. They're doing whatever they can, and it's getting more and more like aggressive because nothing's happening. I imagine Elijah is kind of sitting back, just watching the festivities like this is entertaining and sad all at the same time. It's just like you guys are running around in circles and nothing is happening. He starts to mock them, which I love. It's like the sarcasm is just on point. He's like, well, maybe he's asleep. Maybe you need to shout a little louder. Is he in the bathroom right now? He's a little taking care of business. What's going on? So they're responding. They're going to hours pass that they're doing this. 450 of them going crazy, trying to get the attention of Baal, this god. It gets to the point that they're literally cutting themselves. They're bleeding out just to try to get this god's attention. I don't know if you could guess. Nothing happens. So now it's in the afternoon. Elijah's like, all right, calm down, guys. It's my turn. You've had your turn. Now it's my turn. He makes his altar, puts 12 stones under it, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, put some wood on there. And these are bowls, the sacrifice. They're not small. It's not like a chicken wing. It's like an entire bowl that's up there. Then he digs a trench. This is, I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is not like what you normally do when you're building an altar. He digs a trench around the base of this whole entire altar, right? This big, huge altar. And then he pours water on it. Again, just a little bit of science. Water is not easy to ignite with fire. Okay? It makes it more difficult. So he pours water on it like 3 times until the entire trench is full. So he's poured it from the top to the bottom. So the entire offering, everything, the wood, the stones, everything is just saturated with water. So much so that the trench is full of water. Now, fun side note, there's a drought going on at the same time. So everyone's watching Elijah do this. They're like, dude, like we should be using that water like that. I'm thirsty right now. Why are you wasting this water? So this is what he does. And then he turns and he kind of takes a step into the moment in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 36. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you are Lord God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Because he's trying, right? This is the whole goal. The goal is not to like show out and show up. The goal here is to draw the hearts of the people back to the true living God. That's the entire purpose of all of this. He continues on. It says, then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. Everything is consumed. I don't know how hot that has to be, but pretty hot. Like it's got to be pretty hot. It is not difficult at this moment to see which God is real and true. Right? Everyone there is just like, oh my goodness, do you see what just happened? Right? The prophets start running. What do you think? Elijah's like, hey, take care of them. They wipe out 450 prophets. And this amazing thing happens. Like Elijah's got to be at cloud 9. He's got to be like way just feeling great because he starts to pray that the drought would end. And he looks out there in the distance and there's this tiny little cloud. He's like, I don't know, fire just fell. Let's do this too. He sees a tiny little cloud and all of a sudden it starts to grow and grow and grow. And this massive storm is on its way. The drought is ending. He's got to be feeling great. So great that a chariot takes off. He picks up his robe, tucks it into his belt, takes off running. This is like insane, really. I mean, it's a miracle. He takes off running and beats the chariot to where they're going. He's like racing a chariot, like a horse drawn, like horses. He's winning this race for about 20-ish miles before they get to the town Jezreel. Like this is just, it's something to see. He gets to the town, and you would think that he'd be so confident. Just like, we did it. God, we did it. Everything's good. Instead, the queen, Jezebel, hears about what happened to the prophets. She puts a hit out on Elijah. And you would think that Elijah, again, everything that just happened, he'd be like super confident. I'm good. Me and God, we got this. That's not what happens. In chapter 19, verse 3, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. So now he's completely alone, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Continuing on. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. Now remember, the last two prayers that are recorded, that the drought would end, check, and that God would show up and consume this altar and the sacrifice in a miraculous way, check. Now he's praying that God would kill him, that God would take him away. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. You see, we think that when all of the circumstances go well, when life is working out our way, when God is obviously showing up in our life, that everything about us feels great and good and wonderful and just living on cloud nine the whole time. But here's what we learned from Elijah. Isolation is a killer. Isolation's a killer. He felt isolated and alone. And even though God was doing incredible works through him, he was suicidal at the end of the day. He didn't want any of it. He turned from fearless to fearful, from conqueror to conquered, that quick. The thing about community, it keeps you grounded. When you have people in your life, they help you be balanced. You're not overly confident. You're not underconfident. They speak truth. They allow you to see yourself, the world around you, to see God clearer. Now, in this story with Elijah, he has a conversation with God, and God's like, oh, calm down, buddy. Like, I got you. I have a remnant of people that are still alive, that I've saved, that are rising up. Elijah realizes that he's not alone anymore. He's like, oh, I didn't know. Okay, I'm good. And he goes on, right? This is towards the end of his ministry, and the next guy that's tapped from Elijah is Elisha, right? So there's this handoff that happens. And if you've ever wondered what it looks like to be done with ministry as a whole, when you're like following Jesus with your whole life, you're like, okay, but I'm done now. I've like finished it up. Elijah actually gives us the retirement example. A chariot will come from heaven and will pick you up and take you back to heaven. That's what retirement, when you're following Jesus, that's what it looks like. So if that chariot hasn't showed up yet, it's like the first Uber. If that Uber hasn't showed up yet, then it's still time to keep on working, right? So Elijah goes to heaven. Elisha gets like he's like tapped, like his shoulders up. He's like, okay, you're the next one. He's wearing the mantle. He asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And this is right at the beginning. So just so you know, this is now example number 2. This is right at the beginning. Like all this just happens. He sees his buddy go up. He's been trained. He's like, all right, I think I got this. I hope. And he goes on. And this is what happens in 2 Kings chapter 2. From there, Elisha went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some boys came out of the town and jeered at him. It's not a term we usually use anymore. They're making fun of him. Get out of here, Baldy. Okay. So here's, you can make the argument that Elisha, which if you want to know which one comes first, they're alphabetical, helps out a lot. But if you want to make the argument that Elisha was on a mission, a purpose from God, he needed to go and do this thing, and all of a sudden he's confronted with these young men, these boys, and he decides that he needs to do something about it, you can make that argument. I get it. He doesn't quite go where I thought he would go if you're reading the story for the first time. I feel like he leans into the offended part. He goes a little overboard. This is what happens. Next verse. He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. I don't know if you knew you could do that. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. Oh, we hear about bear maulings every once in a while, and it's like, what, 1, maybe 2 people, like maybe a tent gets attacked, right? And then they go like take care of the bear. 42 boys. Do you know the scene that was? I mean, this is gory. This is like just bears running, just going after these boys. And I mean, they got 42 of them. How many were there? I don't know. It doesn't tell us. It's weird too, because that's pretty much all that the scripture says about it. That's like all that they noted. They're like, yeah, this happened. And then it moves on. Here's the thing that we can learn from this moment. And I know I'm kind of making light of it, but I also think that we can draw some things out of this. That these boys were essentially a bad community, right? We are created for community. We have a draw towards community. We're going to find someone to connect with. And it's not always the good ones. Sometimes we have a common cause or a common ideology, and it leads us in a direction that's not healthy, right? So you have this negative, bad community of boys, and then you have this prophet that is isolated and alone again. And what does he do? Wipes them out. Crazy talk. Like, this is nuts. I think if he would have had some people around him in that moment, even just a couple, they probably would have said, whoa, Elisha, like maybe hold back the bears. Like, I think, like maybe just make him like run up to him and just like make him be afraid. I don't think we need to maul them all, right? Like maybe we call it quits before then. I don't know. But that's just me. But I'm assuming that if you have community in your life, you're going to be a better version of yourself. You're not going to take it too far. Like this guy. You're not going to take it too far. So here's the reality. We are created for community. Right? We are created to be in relationship with people. And you might be in here this morning and you're like, you know what? People are fine, whatever. I'm just here because I love God. And that's good. We want you to love God. Like, that's a good choice. That's a good step. But we get so focused on this vertical relationship. I mean, how silly does this sound? When you get here, you're like, oh, God, I love you. God, I serve you. God, you're the priority in my life. All these other people are crazy. I want nothing to do with them. You know, the creation that are made in your own image, like I am, but they're like their image a little bit different. Like they don't have the good side. I don't know. I'm not okay with them. Me and you, we're good. How silly is that? God created us to be in relationship with Him, absolutely, but also in relationship with one another. We have this innate thing inside of us. This is how we're created, to be in relationship with one another. Here's the positive example. We're going to stick with the Old Testament. This is found in the book of Daniel. It's about 250-ish years later. So essentially at this time you have King Nebuchadnezzar, which is super fun to say. King Nebuchadnezzar. And he is a Babylonian king. And he has this, like, his habit of going in and sending his army into different foreign lands and countries and nations and communities and just wiping them out, but then also taking their best and brightest back to Babylon. And he puts them in like this leadership development program. And essentially he makes this court of people that are all foreign, but they're the best and the brightest. And he actually utilizes that to strengthen his own nation, which is like risky, but also kind of brilliant also at the same time. So he's done this over and over again. He also does this in Jerusalem. He goes in, sends his army in. They do their thing. They bring back the best and the brightest. So there's this group of young Jewish men that are back in Babylon, this foreign land. And this is kind of what we're going to talk about for the next little bit. So they have this connection with the leadership, though. Like these Jewish men are not living their life the way that everybody else does. They don't eat the same way. They're sticking with their diet, the way that they grew up. They're not going to adopt all these other ideologies. They're not going to worship other gods. They're not going to do everything that everybody else does. They're going to continue on with their priorities, with their value system in a foreign land, but continue on in the way that they're going, in their direction. And it's amazing. They're recognized as strong. They're recognized as wise. They start to stick out in the leadership, like the local leadership starts to realize that this group of people, we can trust them. This group of people have something in addition that everybody else does. There's something special about them. So, about this time, King Nebuchadnezzar, he decides to create a 90-foot tall by 9 feet wide gold statue. Just a little guy, right? That's a lot of gold. He makes this huge entire statue. He decides, he sets a decree out. Everyone's going to worship this thing when the music plays. It's kind of like musical chairs, except for instead of finding a chair, you're going to bow down and worship. Everybody's going to, right? Remember, this king has brought a bunch of foreigners into his land. He needs to maintain control. Everybody has to fall in line. So it makes this decree. Everybody, regardless of where you're from, what you believe, you will bow down and worship this image when the music plays. Daniel chapter 3, verse 6. This is what he says. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. It feels like a pretty valid threat. I've thought a little bit about how I could die, and this is not one of my favorite ideas. So, this happens, and these young men, music plays, everybody bows down, except these young men. And if you can imagine, if you're a small group of people that is set out, and all the leadership is starting to recognize you as special and other than everybody else, there's some people that are gunning for you. There's some people that are trying to knock you down, trying to take your spot, trying to get rid of you. And sure enough, there's some tattletales in the room, right? They see what's going on. They're like, ooh, we got to tell the king this. So they go and they tell the king on these men, these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if I chuckle a little bit, it's because my dad used to tell me the story and say, Shadrach, Meshach, and to bed we go. So that's always in the back of my mind. Anyway, so they bring forth, they're like, these boys, these men, they didn't do it. So the king calls them up. He says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. That's a bold move. That's a big statement. I mean, it's not calling a couple of bears down from the woods to maul him, but, I mean, this is bold, right? Continuing on in verse 17. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Now, this is wonderful. That's bold. That's strong. That's confident. But let's look at it for what it is. If we believe that God would always intervene on our behalf every time that we came up against a challenge, a struggle, something in opposition to us, if we believe that God was going to come through every single one of those times and give us exactly what we want, that'd be really easy. Like, yeah, of course. Of course. I want Santa Claus in my corner too. I would like a genie in my back pocket also. The next statement, though, is massive. This is everything. This next statement, verse 18. But even if he does not, even if he doesn't come through, even if he doesn't do what we know he can, for whatever reason, if he doesn't, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. We're not going to do it. It's not just because I think that this is going to save my life. In spite of the fact that I might lose my life, I believe that this is the one true God, and I will not bow my knee to anyone or anything else. That is incredible resolve in the midst of an incredibly difficult situation and circumstance. Their community, as small as it was, held them together so strong. Now, as you can imagine, this doesn't go over well with King Nebuchadnezzar. He's not like, oh, okay. Like, he decides, all right, you gonna throw that in my face? Look at what I've done for you. I didn't kill you. I brought you back to my land. I've given you these positions. I've given you this role. That's it. Turn the furnace up, right? They go to the thermostat. They turn it up. 7 times hotter is what they do. There's no thermostat, by the way. They just make it super, super, super hot. Right? So he turns it up 7 times hotter. He has them tied up, and he orders that there's these soldiers, these guards, take them to be thrown into this furnace. Chapter 3, verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, Your Majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. So, I mean, they're just watching this whole thing happen. I mean, this is how hot it is. It's so hot that as the guards approach to throw them in, The guards wearing their armor died before they ever got there. That's how hot it was. These men fall into the furnace and they just walk around. I mean, this gives a whole new meaning to fireside lounge. I mean, they're just walking around in the flames like nothing. They're not tied anymore. There's a fourth one in there all of a sudden. This is different. And then King Nebuchadnezzar's like, all right, okay, I guess they're not going to die. Like they've been in there a while now. They're not trying to like climb out. They're just hanging out in there. He finally is like, okay, timeout's over. Come on back. That's what I do with my son. Timeout's up. Come on back. Let's talk about it. The next verse we're looking at. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and royal advisors crowded around them, obviously. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies. Continue on. Nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them, which I love that they added that part. They got so close, they're like, there's nothing, and you don't even smell like smoke. You don't even smell like a cigar. Like, I don't know. Then in true like King Nebuchadnezzar form, like he sees what has happened. He recognizes it, right? Obviously this God is real and true and good. And he decides, he praises their God, and then he makes another decree. He's real big on decrees. He says, nobody's going to speak evil or against their God. He's not necessarily adopting them as his one and only, but nobody's going to speak ill of them. And then in true Nebuchadnezzar form, he says, and if they do, they will be cut into pieces and their houses will be turned to rubble. Because he's got to have some like gotcha at the end. This is a question that I've been wrestling with all week long and in preparation for this. Without their community, would these men have done what they did? I don't know. I don't know if we can say yes or no. But here's what I do believe with my whole heart. That community gave them strength in order to do what they knew they needed to do. And when they did what they valued, when they stepped out, regardless of the fear and regardless of the threat, regardless of what they knew would happen, they still did it anyway. And I have to believe that the strength came from, that resolve came from knowing they were not alone. And if they were going to be thrown in the fire, they were not going to be alone in that fire. Some of us are in a fire right now. And it's sad to say, but if you don't have community at this point, it's a little bit late. We talk about community as preventative. You want community before, a depth of relationship before you get into that season. Because it is so hard to find legitimate, authentic community when your life is falling apart. Community isn't just proximity. It's engagement with others. It's choosing to share your life with others. It's choosing to do life together, to get vulnerable with one another. When we are known by others, and when we know others, right? This is intimacy. When we are known and we know other people in our life, I believe that we move in the direction of the full potential that God created and placed in us. It's God's plan for us. It's how we're hardwired. We're not fearful in those moments. We're not insecure in those moments. We can stand with confidence. Regardless of what life throws at me, I've got people around me, and I've got a God that loves me. It's not about the circumstance, the situation, how it all ends up. It's about the context of how you walk through life with community. Now, we do this on a regular basis. We try to do this intentionally. We try to create environments for community. I mean, this is why we do the Canyons cookouts throughout the summer. Because we want to get you around a table eating a meal with people that you get to talk to. Right? During a service with the lights off, it's like, you can't talk to anybody now. You can't develop a relationship now. But you get them outside and around a table with food, yeah, you can start that off. It's why we hope, I'm going to give you a secret. We hope that every single person that is part of Canyon Church joins a small group. Because we believe that that is where life change happens. That's the best context for life change to happen. You can get great information on a Sunday morning, but if all you're doing is sitting in a row, it's just affecting your thought. When you start to move in that direction, you can ask questions, you can sit in a circle with someone and start to do life with people. That's where that life change, that's where those commitments start to have legs and move in a direction, and then it starts to have longevity and grow. Right? Small groups are a big deal. We want everybody to be in a small group. And I know we can't promise that everyone's going to have the perfect relationship in their small group, but I'm just going to challenge you, don't give up on it. Like if you've been in a small group before, you're like, yeah, I tried that, cross it off the list, don't need to do that again. Try another one. Try another one. Also, if you're considering retirement out of ministry, so to speak, like if you're like, I followed God enough, like I don't need to be in a small group, I'm good. You might be good, but you might be limiting the impact that you have on other people around you. Maybe joining a small group isn't about what you get out of it, but what you can offer and help other people walk through life with. Just some food for thought. So I'm gonna pray here. I've got some questions for us to finish up with. But I want to make sure I say this. We have some cards out in the lobby. There's the big 4LCB sign, and right underneath it, there's some cards that you can fill out. If you are interested in small groups at all, you have questions about it, or you just want to sign up, you're like, yep, I'm in, I need that. Fill out a card, and we'll start that process and find a spot for you, because we know that life is better connected. Now, before I pray, here's some questions, because I want us to continue this dialogue throughout this week. Is it easy or hard for you to connect in community? Why or why not? Next question. Do you wrestle with the value of community or the ability to prioritize it in your schedule? Can you go back for a second? I have to say one more thing. If you think about this long enough, I hope you'll get there. Let's just be clear, though. If you value community, it will be found in your schedule. Stings a little bit. That's the truth. If you value something, you will make space for it. Okay, let's keep on going. What community are you connecting with? Which direction is it leading you? Like I said before, just because you have a semblance of community, like those boys that were calling names, doesn't mean it's a good one that's leading you in the right direction. Choose a community intentionally. Not just because you sit in the bleachers next to them, not just because you all like to hunt and fish together, not just because you have shared common interests. Choose a community that's going to lead you into a better version of who you are. And at the end of the day, when you choose community here at Candy's Church, you're choosing community that's going to lead you to a loving Heavenly Father. The whole point. The whole point. Let me pray. I'll get you out of here. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. God, you are good. You are a good God. And even though we have difficult moments and seasons in life, that doesn't change how good you are. God, I pray that we would recognize the people that you've made available to us in our life. I pray that we would choose to have those people as part of our community. It is because of them, it is because of the people we surround ourselves with that will allow us the strength in the moment of need to choose our highest value rather than what is less painful. God, I pray that we would learn how to trust people again. I pray that we would learn how to trust you, and that you are absolutely trustworthy, that you love us, you care about us, and part of your gift for us is people in our lives that hold us to you, that hold us in those difficult times, that celebrate with us in the moments of celebration, that mourn with us in the moments of mourning. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. Thanks for being here with us. We'll see you next week for part 2 of Verses.